What if the real horrors of the American West didn't bleed out in duels, but festered quietly under the skin? In the next few minutes, we'll expose the forgotten chapters where greed turned illness into business, pain into entertainment, and people into profit. From market bounties to medicine frauds, every story reveals a part of history that was deliberately whitewashed. This isn't the West of quick-draw myths. It's the one built on flesh, infection, and buried truth. Before we move on, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Number 1. Scalp bounties and massacres. Across the frontier, violence became currency. Colonial and territorial governments authorized bounty systems that rewarded settlers for bringing in the scalps of indigenous people. The value fluctuated by age and gender, sometimes favoring the scalp of a child over that of an adult. Official proclamations gave the practice a veneer of legality, turning prejudice into payroll. Greed soon eclipsed any pretense of justice. Bounty hunters delivered scalps of non-combatants, even turning on neighboring tribes or innocent families to claim payment. Administrators rarely questioned authenticity. Receipts were issued, ledgers balanced, and reports filed as though they were logging supplies instead of lives. Within that paperwork, violence became routine. Notes described flesh as inventory. Clerks tallied deaths like taxes owed. The act was absorbed by bureaucracy so completely that morality no longer entered the equation. The West's earliest enterprise was not exploration, but the monetization of killing. From that trade grew a darker economy, where livelihood meant life-taking, and human worth was reduced to a counted scalp. Number 2. The Sand Creek Massacre, 1864. In the cold season of 1864, a Colorado militia rode toward a village of Cheyenne and Arapaho families who had been promised protection. They raised both a white flag and the American flag above their camp, believing these symbols would guarantee safety. Instead, the soldiers opened fire at dawn, claiming it as a strike for national honor. Survivors described an unrelenting assault. When the gunfire ended, soldiers moved through the camp, mutilating the bodies of the fallen, taking hair, skin, and private parts as trophies of triumph. Women and children lay among the dead, their remains desecrated in acts that showed more ritual than rage. The attack was later celebrated in public speeches and newspapers as a victory over hostile savages. Official reports recorded it as a military success, omitting the truth of surrender flags and civilian deaths. Only later did testimony expose the event as genocide disguised by patriotic language, revealing how military authority turned slaughter into ceremony and cruelty into sanctioned duty. Number 3. Frontier lynchings. Outside the courtroom walls, rope became the fastest verdict. In the scattered towns of the frontier, law officers were few and tempers were quick. Crowds formed overnight, claiming to defend order, while ignoring every rule that defined justice. Lynchings were announced as communal duty, but their targets were often minorities, strangers, or the poor who lacked allies. A rumor or accusation could end a life before sunrise. These executions fed a restless hunger for control, and the gathering itself became theater. Each knot, each torch raised, was a ritual act meant to remind everyone watching who commanded fear. Some towns even posted notices for upcoming hangings, drawing crowds with the same tone used for markets or fairs. Authorities stood by or joined in, folding legality into spectacle. What passed for judgment was no longer about crimes, but about dominance. The gallows became a stage where power performed its own authority, the moment justice turned into entertainment, and terror became the currency of order. Number 4. Chinese immigrant massacres. As the railroads stitched the continent together, Chinese laborers worked through avalanches, fires, and famine to lay the iron that made progress possible. When the work was done and prosperity followed, they became targets rather than partners. Economic jealousy mixed with deep racial hatred, forming towns ready to burn what those workers had built. Across Western settlements, mobs raided Chinatowns, setting shops aflame and driving residents into the wilderness. Local officers often stood by, their silence granting permission. Courts refused to convict, even when murders filled the newspapers. The message was clear: those lives had no legal weight, their suffering unworthy of record. Whole communities vanished overnight, their homes and temples erased until only debris remained. Frontier folklore replaced them with tales of hardy pioneers, crafting a landscape that appeared purely white by design. The truth was buried with the victims and their stories. The expansion of the West rested on immigrant blood, and each lost Chinatown widened the silence that history still struggles to fill. Number 5. Wild West medicine shows. Traveling medicine shows rolled across the plains like portable carnivals, selling miracle cures that promised relief from every known ache. The real cure they offered, though, was distraction. Their wagons carried stages, banners, and quick-talking performers who mesmerized crowds long enough to sell bottles of colored liquid they called medicine. Those tonics delivered a brief rush because most were loaded with alcohol, opium, or mercury. A swallow might bring warmth and calm, masking real harm beneath the surface. For settlers isolated from doctors, that flash of comfort felt like salvation. Money changed hands, applause followed, and the show moved on before the effects faded. Each performance tied survival to spectacle. A song, a juggling act, a prayer, then the sales pitch. Health turned into gamble. Hope itself became part of the trade, bottled and sold beneath the music. Yet behind the painted wagons lay a quiet toll. Lives weakened, addictions born, and trust misplaced in men who sold the illusion that pain could be cured with a smile and a sip. Number 6. Prostitution and trafficking. In saloon towns and mining camps, the business that never ran dry was the sale of human bodies. The shortage of women turned demand into a full market, where the promise of companionship masked an organized system of trade. Women were recruited through false offers of work or marriage, only to find themselves indebted, trapped, and passed between frontier towns like cargo on a route designed for profit. Inside the brothels, lives wore down fast. Dirty bedding, poor sanitation, and constant violence brought infection and disease. Many suffered injuries that never healed, their bodies showing the same confinement marks seen in prisons. When sickness spread, there were no doctors, only alcohol, laudanum, and silence. Behind the doors, the business reached City Hall. Madams shared earnings with local officials, ensuring protection and tax revenue disguised as civic order. The quiet suffering of women became the foundation for public prosperity. The myth of Western freedom collapsed here, turned into an invisible network of bondage hidden beneath its own applause. Number 7. Outlaw violence and gang wars. The West's most enduring heroes were often its most predatory criminals. Bands of gunmen roamed the plains, extorting ranchers, robbing stagecoaches, and ambushing trains. Each town they entered became a stage where violence dictated respect. Their raids crippled small settlements, yet stories of their daring masked the destruction they left behind. Newspapers quickly learned how profitable crime could be. Editors printed sensational accounts that painted these gangs as bold outsiders rather than organized killers. Readers devoured every episode, following the crimes as if reading serialized adventure tales. The line between terror and entertainment blurred until murder read like performance. In some regions, gangs held real authority. They controlled roads, taxed merchants, and even appointed local enforcers. Lawmen served at their mercy or joined their ranks, creating towns where crime became administration. Over time, communities learned not to oppose them, but to adapt. The outlaws' methods folded into civic life. From that uneasy survival grew a lasting myth that savagery could masquerade as courage, and domination could look like freedom. Number 8. Disease and amputation. Infection was the enemy that no one could shoot. On the frontier, a splinter or minor cut could turn mortal within days. With little understanding of germs and few clean tools, a wound might swell, blacken, and spread its poison through the body faster than any bullet. Amputation stood as the only answer, a crude gamble between life and death. The surgeries were carried out on rough tables, with saws meant for woodwork, and no anesthesia, but liquor or a stick to bite. The screams carried through camp. Yet the work went on. Limbs were discarded beside doorways or tossed onto burn piles, symbols of survival carved from pain itself. Patients who lived faced lingering infection and the emptiness of a missing limb. Camps and towns, packed with untreated waste and filthy water, turned sickness into an epidemic cycle. Even the healthy grew weaker, their bodies worn by malnutrition and fear. Here, survival meant endurance. Life shrunk into breath, pain, and the will to keep both. The myths of the Wild West hide a slower, deeper kind of ruin. Violence, disease, and sanctioned neglect hollowed out the human body long before gunfire finished the job. Every camp and mining town became a quiet experiment in how much suffering a society could accept while still calling itself free. The frontier was less a land of heroes than a workshop for endurance, where pain was measured in silence, profit, and survival. Beneath the romantic legends lies a pulse still faintly heard today. The hidden West that breathes between the pages of history, waiting for someone to finally listen.